From advertising to software as a service to data.
Across all of our programs and clients, we've seen a 55 to 65% open rate.
Getting brands authentically integrated into content performs better than TV advertising.
Typical lifespan of an article is about 24 to 36 hours.
If we're reaching out to the right person with the right message and a clear call to action, then it's just a matter of timing.
Welcome to the MarTech Podcast, and I Hear Everything production. In this podcast, you'll hear the stories of world-class marketers that use technology to drive business results and achieve career success. We'll unearth the real-world experiences of some of the brightest minds in the marketing and technology space so you can learn the tools, tips, and tricks they've learned along the way. Now here's the host of the MarTech Podcast, Benjamin Shapiro.
Welcome to the MarTech Podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Shapiro, and today we're going to discuss corporate PR for B2B companies. Joining us is Lindsey Groepper, who is the president of BLASTmedia, which is the only PR agency in the U.S. dedicated to B2B SaaS. BLASTmedia understands the unique challenges associated with scaling a SaaS business and uses media coverage and thought leadership to impact the four primary pillars: investors, employees, partners, and of course, customers. And today, Lindsay and I are going to talk about cracking the modern corporate narrative. All right, here's the first part of my conversation with Lindsey Groepper, the president of BLASTmedia. Lindsay, welcome to the MarTech Podcast.
Hey, Benjamin, thanks so much for having me. And, I could not have given a better intro myself. It's like we wrote it.
I was just about to say, why it sounds so good is because you've got a whole staff of PR agents that help craft the copy to give it to us. And honestly, that's been happening for years. BLASTmedia, a wonderful institution for public relations in the B2B SaaS industry, and fortunately for us, provides us with a steady stream of wonderful guests. And as you mentioned, does a great job writing copy describing those guests. So thank you for everything you do. We've got a great relationship working together, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts about the industry that you've sort of taken over a little bit, the B2B SaaS PR. It seems like there is a new corporate narrative. There's a talk track that a lot of B2B SaaS companies are following. What's the code? How do we crack it? What is the modern corporate narrative for B2B SaaS companies?
And I will even take this outside of B2B SaaS and say, in general, the modern corporate narrative. So when we typically think about a spokesperson and their role, our minds usually go to the CEO of any company that's a primary spokesperson. And historically, that person's role is to talk about the company, to talk about the corporate aspects of the business. That could be fundraising, it could be earnings, it could be new products, it could be innovation. And while there's absolutely still a place for that, really what's driving a shift in this modern corporate narrative is who makes up the buyers today. Over 70% of B2B buyers are millennials. And we love millennials, but millennials think differently and have different expectations in life. So what we're starting to see with our clients and in conversations that I have with potential clients is this need and desire to differentiate amongst these buyers. When all things considered equal with features and benefits and pricing, how do we stand out? So the way to do that is through humanizing the brand, which is the central part of this modern corporate narrative.
I'm glad that you brought up that the buyer has changed, because often we're talking about buyer behaviors. And I've heard by conducting, 1,500 podcast interviews over the last 8 or so years, how the buyer's journey is changing. The consumers are self-selecting. They do their own research. They don't want to talk to sales. They just want the information and to make their decision themselves. And we always hear about the buyer journey changing, and it makes sense that the buyer is changing. They are a different demographic. What is rooted in the millennials wanting to change the buyer experience? Why are, let's call you and me millennials, why are we different than our grandparents who used to buy software over the phone, or our parents who used to get together and have cocktails and do it over a business meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's generous of you to call me a millennial, because I am very much on the edge.
Gen X, millennial, what is it? Same stuff.
I'm going to run with it. It's all good. So really what defines this generation, and it's, yes, the buyers that are in this generation, it's also talent. These folks are also now your investors, they're your partners. But what is the line that goes through this generation is a desire for and a need for connection and purpose when choosing a vendor, a partner, a place of work. So if you are in a competitive category, whether you're B2C or B2B, again, if all things are considered equal, roughly, we're all saying the same thing, we sell the same widget, what's going to set you apart and have that person say, I want to work at this company, invest in this company, or buy this specific product or service is, do I like the people who are leading the company? How do I feel during my interactions with them? And do I align my values with theirs? So if that's what the buyers are craving, why aren't we giving it to them?
See, I think that there is a level that is leading into that, which goes into the definition of millennial. Somebody that was born with a computer, access to the internet, information is easier to find. So when we are constantly inundated with advertising, we start to tune it out. And when we are trying to figure out all of the different brands across the entire world that we can get access to, who sticks out is the one with a clear and coherent story. So as much as we are now all so PPC, last click attribution, analytics focused, what is really helping separate brands is the art part of marketing, not the science. So what are the ways that you crack into that corporate narrative and build yourself a story that actually resonates?
The thing I'll add to that too is that they're able to sniff out bullshit really quickly. So they know when they're being overly messaged, when they're being lied to, when their things are being hidden from brands and spokespeople. And we'll get into sort of what the few of these like key elements are. But if this is what buyers are demanding, how do you do it? How do you humanize your brand? And how do you say, these are my values as a brand, and then draw those people in so that you can align on that and find that purpose and that connection with them? And the very first thing that we suggest for all of our clients is to diversify your spokesperson bench. So you may be running the most incredible DEIB programs internally. You may have the most interesting mental health support system within your organization, or have the top ESG reporting and initiatives going on, but nobody knows about it because the only thing you're doing is putting out a release in your annual report, or it's all stuck internally. You're not talking about it. So how are folks going to know? So one of the things that we suggest is get out of your CEO talk track and start elevating a different bench of spokespeople. So whether that could be a CHRO, it could be just a head of HR, but someone in that HR realm, or you might have a DEIB lead, depending on the size of your organization. They're those folks at your organization for a reason, is because they are leading thinkers in their space. And they're the ones spearheading these programs. So just like you would pitch your CEO to talk about innovation within the company, have a conversation with those different leaders and talk about the initiatives that are going on internally and pitch them as spokespeople in the media or feature them on LinkedIn to help other organizations learn how to do the same. So that's number one, is figure out who else do you have within your organization that's going to bring some of those values to life, because I guarantee you have them, you're just not leveraging them.
Okay, so we're going to make someone other than the figurehead at the top of the company be the public voice of the organization. What are some other ways to get your message out to your consumers?
Another way is to give access to the person who's running the company in a different way. So we encourage our corporate spokesperson, which is typically the CEO, to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and to become okay with being personal, to get out of the growth, innovation, product, corporate talk track and into the personal. And that's hard for a lot of people. But if I'm a potential buyer, if I'm a partner, if I'm a VP level hire, I have a lot of offers, a lot of different vendors that I'm considering. Again, these millennial buyers, they want to know who is the person leading this company and what does he or she or they stand for. And the way to promote that is to get the personal stories, the leadership philosophies, the winning culture secrets, the vulnerabilities of what your founder CEO has overcome to get what they are today Are they a first generation immigrant? Are they the first person to graduate from university in their family? Do they have a military background? Do they struggle with mental health themselves? Get to those stories and figure out a way that they're comfortable talking about that. One of the most powerful stories that we had with one of our clients, and it was actually unbeknownst to us, we hosted a story mining session with the CEO, and he uncovered that he struggled with bipolar disorder his entire life. So we're like, interesting. Can you talk more about how that's impacted you as a leader? And it ended up being how he developed this incredible mental health support system and program internally at their company. I mean, we didn't obviously know that it existed. And so we explained why it's important to share this and let other leaders know, A, it's okay with being vulnerable, and B, to show all of your partners, potential buyers and hires that you really put this mental health first and foremost at your company, which again, value alignment for those that care about that issue.
Talk to me a little bit about marketing channels. When it comes to getting your message out, absolutely makes a ton of sense of humanizing the brand. Candidly, it's something that I always pitch when we are trying to sell podcast production services. Is the purpose of doing a podcast is to not just have another marketing channel, but to give the people in your organization a voice that the rest of the outside world can hear. You want to humanize your brand. When you're thinking about marketing channels, not just how do I find employees, not how do I communicate to investors, I want my customers to understand who we are, what we do, what our products are, and why they should buy them. How has the narrative changed around marketing channels?
I mean, multi-channel has been around a long time. Where marketers need to do a better job is consistency of narrative across channels. You think of it as, okay, I have this thing I love, right? Let's say it's that conversation that we've had about dealing with bipolar disorder is we can pitch it, right, as an op-ed or a byline to Fast Company or to Fortune. Awesome. And oftentimes we say, okay, that's great. And then when that runs, we'll share it on social. But really what you should be using that as a central piece of content and giving it a lot of legs. So in that instance, recording that conversation, turning it into short form, consumerized video that you can share in pieces and parts, not only on LinkedIn, but that your potentially even your sales team can leverage in their prospect outreach and touch points, including these things in your customer communications. If you have a customer advisory board, if you have a customer newsletter, including it in there. If your spokesperson doesn't have their own Medium account or isn't active on their own personal LinkedIn, ensure that that message is getting out there, and then certainly on any other corporate social channels that you have. But the reality is we're all consuming news in different places. Benjamin, I don't know like what your preferred channel is. I host a podcast and people assume that I am an avid consumer of podcasts. I'm not. I am still aging myself. I still like to go to the websites that I like that have news and I read them. That is what I enjoy doing. It's how I get my information. But everyone has their preferred channels and their preferred length of time that they're willing to commit to something. So we have to ensure that when we have something important, that we're slicing and dicing in as many different formats and lengths and mediums as we can so that we're hitting the people in the way that they prefer it.
It seems like there is a medium here where you're taking your personalized company stories from a spokesperson that is a real human being, putting a mic and a camera in front of them and letting them talk about what they feel, what they think, and then trying to splash that around the internet as much as you possibly can in as many places as you possibly can. The problem with that is it gets away from this focus that we've had over the last decade or two of, I need to be able to track every single click. I need to be able to figure out if this marketing activity is driving a near-term dollar of return. And that's what we're going to talk about in tomorrow's episode. So that wraps up this episode of the MarTech Podcast. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Lindsey Groepper, the president of BLASTmedia. Join us again tomorrow when Lindsay and I continue our conversation talking about the future of PR measurement for B2B companies. If you can't wait till our next episode and you'd like to learn more about Lindsay, you could find a link to her LinkedIn profile in our show notes. You can contact her on Twitter, where her handle is Lindsey Groepper. That's LINDSEY GROEPPER. Or you could visit her company's website, which is blastmedia.com. Just one more link in our show notes I'd like to tell you about. If you didn't have a chance to take notes while you were listening to this podcast, head over to martechpod.com, where we have summaries of all of our episodes and contact information for our guests. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, and you can even apply to be the next guest speaker on the Martech podcast. Of course, you can always reach out on social media. Our handle is MartechPod, MartechPod, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can contact me directly on LinkedIn. My handle is Ben J. Shap, BenJShap. And if you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream of marketing and technology knowledge in your podcast feed, we're going to publish an episode every day this year. So hit the subscribe button in your podcast app, and we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning. All right, that's it for today. But until next time, my advice is to just focus on keeping your customers happy.